The Cosmic Walk, the great story. Mystery generates wonder. Wonder generates awe. Today we glimpse the beauty of our cosmic universe story. It is the story of the universe. It is the story of our Earth. It is the story of humankind. It is your story and my story.
In the beginning is the great mystery, the churning quantum foam of potentiality. Through the mystery, all things come to be. Not one thing has its being except through the great mystery. From it, all of us come into being. From the void and the dark came the light and the spark.
Some 13.7 billion years ago, a great ball of fire expanded outwards into the creation of the universe. Space and time, shadows and light, and the universe expands. As the universe expands, it begins to cool, and after about 1 million years, things cool sufficiently for hydrogen and helium to bring with them new forms of matter, and the mystery is there, from the beginning, in the relationship between these things.
1 billion years later, galaxies come forth. Stars are born, live, and die. Larger stars in their death throes explode to become supernova. As they blast out into the cosmos, their supernovas create in themselves the elements of life. And the great mystery is there in the creation and destruction, and in the stardust that forms every living thing.
10 billion years later, 4.6 billion years ago, our grandmother's star went supernova. Stars live and die, and this star gave up its life in an explosion that gave rise to our star, the star we call the sun. And the great mystery was there in the transformation.
4.5 billion years ago, our solar system forms from the remains of a supernova explosion. The sun and a great disk of matter emerge. All the planets and other members of our solar system family. Here begins the story of what will become one blue and white pearl of a planet. The great bombardment begins. Comets and meteorites pelt the Earth's thickening crust as it cools. The moon is born when the Earth is impacted by a Mars-sized body, which causes the Earth to tilt to the side, giving rise to the seasons of the year, and the great mystery is there in the dancing of swirling planets and seasons and tides.
4.4 to 4.1 billion years ago, the Earth grows from dust particles to a large, hot, molten planet with a thin, rocky crust. The crust thickens and cracks, and exuberant volcanoes expel seething deep Earth magma to the surface. Steam condenses over the Earth, clouds build, and rain falls for the first time. The rains are torrential. They pour down on the surface of the planet until rivers run over the land and pool into oceans. And the great mystery is there, in the rains.
4 billion years ago, the rich chemical brew in the oceans spawns invisibly the small creatures we call bacteria, and Earth comes alive. And the mystery is there in the first living cells.
3.9 billion years ago, the bacteria swarming over the planet run out of sources of energy. In response to that scarcity, they evolve a way to capture energy from the sun, which they then use to create new sources of food from water and simple minerals. Photosynthesis is created. In the process of photosynthesis, however, the new organisms give off oxygen, a deadly corrosive gas that eventually piles up in the atmosphere and threatens all life. And the great mystery is there in the process.
2 billion years ago, oxygen-loving cells emerge. The first global environmental crisis is averted by the creativity of these tiny cellular creatures who invent a use for oxygen. They breathe it in as we do and use its energy. Oxygen levels continue to rise until they reach near present-day levels. These individual bacteria learn to cooperate and specialize within giant cell cooperatives. Within each cell, some microorganisms create tiny electrical motors that move the colony of sunlight where other organisms capture energy of the sun and others use that energy to synthesize food. The individual parts become less independent but more secure as inseparable parts of new wholes. These types of organisms are the same stuff as all plants and animals today. And the great mystery is there in cooperation.
1 billion years ago, new organisms emerge that begin to eat the sun-gatherers, and the dance of predator and prey begins. The dance promotes the vast diversity of life as predators pick off the least healthy members of their prey species, and the great mystery is there in the diversity of emerging life.
700 million years ago, some organisms begin living together in colonies, finding ways to communicate with one another using chemical messages, and the great mystery is there in the emergence of communities.
600 million years ago, light-sensitive eye spots evolve into eyesight, and the Earth sees itself for the first time. Soft-bodied animals evolve in the oceans, and over the next 70 million years, they evolve shells and jaws, beaks and skeletons, and the mystery is there in the seeing and in the protecting.
460 million years ago, leaving the water, animals such as worms, mollusks, and crustaceans brave the elements to breathe, survive weather, and raise themselves up against gravity. Algae and fungi venture ashore, and mosses evolve. Insects emerge with nearly weightless bodies that permit them to take to the air as the first flying animals. And the great mystery is there in the algae, the fungi, the insects, and the miracle of flight.
395 million years ago, the first amphibians hop and lumber onto the land. They trade their gill slits for air-breathing lungs, and they transform their fins into stubby legs, but they continue to return to the water to lay their eggs. Frogs and toads and their kin come into being, and the great mystery is there with the amphibians.
335 million years ago, the first forests evolve. Over generations, these forests load themselves with carbon extracted from the atmosphere, which later becomes fossilized as coal and oil. As the great forests spread, amphibians transform into pre-reptilian creatures, and the innovation of self-contained eggs allows them to move inland. The great age of reptiles begins, and the great mystery is there in the forests and the reptiles.
235 million years ago, following the fourth and greatest mass extinction on the Earth, the end of the Permian period is followed by the emergence of the dinosaurs. For 170 million years, these animals flourish. Dinosaurs, sometimes as large as 40 meters, were social animals that often traveled and hunted in groups. They developed a behavioral novelty previously unknown in the reptile world: parental care. Some dinosaurs carefully buried their eggs and stayed with their young after they hatched, nurturing them toward independence. And the great mystery is there in the dinosaurs.
225 million years ago, the first mammals, small and nocturnal, jump, climb, swing, and swim through a world of giants. Some rodent-sized insect eaters evolve lactation, allowing females to spend more time in the nest, keeping their young both fed and warm. And the great mystery is there in mammals.
150 million years ago, birds emerge, They're direct descendants of certain dinosaurs whose foreleg bones evolved into wing bones, whose jaw bones evolved into beaks, whose scales evolved into feathers. These ancestor birds were far larger than birds of today, with wingspans as large as 12 meters across, and the mystery is there in the birds.
115 million years ago, plants evolved the gorgeous sexual displays we call flowers, making them irresistible to insects by means of colors, fragrances, and delightful nectars. Insects drawn to the nectar unknowingly transport pollen from one flower to the next, fertilizing the plants on which they feed. Rooted plants and airborne insects dance. Earth is resplendent in color and motion, and the great mystery is there in the reciprocity of the flowers and the insects.
65 million years ago, shortly after primates appear on the scene, the Cretaceous ends with the fifth mass extinction after an asteroid 6 miles in diameter hits the Yucatan Peninsula. This marks the end of the age of the dinosaurs and the beginning of the age of mammals, the Cenozoic era. With the dinosaurs gone, the once dark and sheltered niche that small animals occupied expands, and those little creatures stride into the daylight, moving quickly to occupy as much of the planetary ecology as possible. Over the next 60 million years, Earth greets rodents and whales, monkeys, horses, cats, dogs, antelope, gibbons, grazing animals, orangutan, gorillas, elephants, chimpanzees, camels, bears, pigs, baboons, and the very first humans. It is the age of mammals, and the great mystery is there in the extinction and the evolution.
4 million years ago, hominids leave the trees, stand up, and walk on 2 legs. The savanna offers the challenges and opportunities for early creatures to evolve into humans as they move over the surface of the earth, eventually spreading themselves over all 6 continents. And the great mystery is there in the standing and the walking.
100,000 years ago, modern humans emerge, and with them come language and art, the urge to explain the mysteries of existence. Shamanic and goddess religions take shape, and spirituality evolves as an integral part of human culture. And the great mystery is there in the talking and the creating, the wondering and the worshipping.
11,000 years ago, human beings invent agriculture. We begin to shape our environment, choosing to cultivate some species and exterminate others. And the great mystery is there in the considering and the nurturing and the culling.
5,000 years ago, the classical religions begin emerging. First Hinduism and Confucianism, followed by Judaism, Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam. And the great mystery is there in new understandings of the holy.
250 years ago, scientists began to calculate the age of the Earth, and we humans use empirical observations to try to understand how old the Earth is. And the mystery is there in the beginnings of science.
In 1929, empirical evidence of the expanding universe is discovered, and the great mystery is there in the discovering. More recently still, evidence of the origin of the universe is discovered in the echo of the Big Bang, evidence of the primordial flaring forth, and the great mystery is present at the origin in this discovery. In 1972, humans gaze back at the Earth from outer space for the first time, and we are awed by our first sight of our planet home in its entirety, a blue and white pearl shining in the darkness of space. And in our looking and our awe, Earth sees herself, her wholeness, her beauty, and the great mystery is there, in Earth and the cosmos becoming conscious of itself.
This is a vast and beautiful story with so many details that no two of us can possibly have exactly the same story. Please consider adding your life events to your string of beads. Today we tell the story of the universe as our sacred story, and that first flowing forth continues, and the great mystery is here, in this moment, in each of us and in all of us together.
May we continue to grow in wisdom and in skill as we learn better ways to care for our earth, and may our story continue for a long, long time.